On June 12, 1993, Nigeria held a presidential election, widely regarded as the freest and fairest in the country's history. The election was contested between Chief Moshood Kashimawo Olawale Abiola, representing the Social Democratic Party, SDP, and Alhaji Bashir Tofa, representing the National Republican Convention. The election had a high voter turnout and was characterized by widespread support across ethnic, religious, and regional lines. However, before the results were announced, the military regime of General Ibrahim Babangida annulled the election, thereby denying Nigerians the opportunity to witness a democratic transition. This act sparked widespread protests and civil unrest across the country, with many Nigerians demanding the restoration of Chief MKO Abiola's mandate. Chief MKO Abiola, the presumed winner of the annulled election, became a symbol of Nigeria's struggle for democracy. He was subsequently arrested and detained by the military government. Tragically, he died in custody on July 7, 1998, under suspicious circumstances. In recognition of the significance of June 12 and the role played by Chief MKO Abiola in Nigeria's democratic struggle, President Muhammadu Buhari on June 6, 2018, declared June 12 as Nigeria's Democracy Day, shifting the date from May 29. This decision was made to honor Chief MKO Abiola and acknowledge the sacrifices made by him and other pro-democracy activists. Joining us on this show this morning to discuss the significance of today in our democracy is His Royal Majesty Samuel Oluyemi Falae, CFR, GCON, a political leader, technocrat, a former Minister of Finance, and he served also as Secretary to the military government of General President Ibrahim Babangida. Kabisi, good morning. Welcome to the morning show.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Morning, sir. Well, before you joined us, I'd tried to reel off the names of those heroes and the villains who participated in the June 12 saga. You were one of the persons who stood firm during that NADECO struggle after the annulment of the election. There were others whose names I've tried to mention, Pafre Urewane, Mr. Omashola, Alaja Suliat Adedeji, Shehu Sani, journalists, Akinade Shokon, Kunle Ajibade, Chris Anyanwu, a long list of persons who were involved in that struggle. Frank Kokori, who left the Nupeng, all of you fought for, democracy, just as there were also villains like Abimbola Davis and others, Kanu, who was yearning for Abacha and all of that. But when you look back, many years after, do you think that the struggle was worth it? Or do you regret it? Particularly how years after the struggle, other people have been dancing on the grave of June 12, and there is even now so much presentism, present-mindedness of persons who, don't remember the heroes, don't remember the villains, but they remember the fruits of the labors of heroes past. Over to you, Kabisi.
Well, thank you very much indeed. I have absolutely no regret at all for participating in the resistance to military dictatorship, exemplified in the annulment of the June 12 presidential election result. On the contrary, I'm very proud that I had the privilege to have played a role in that struggle. If you recognize that I was, first of all, a civil servant, a banker, and then I became secretary to General Babangida's government and Minister of Finance in that administration. And therefore, a colleague of General Sani Abacha and the other military people. Of course, they expected me to support the position of the government. So they were alarmed and angry that, to quote some of them, that I ganged up with the NADECO people. But it was a matter of conscience. I had no choice but to support democracy. They tried very hard to portray Abiola as a person who was not worthy of our support. But they were missing the point. We were not supporting the person of Abiola. Certainly not. They even told some of us that in the Southwest, that Abiola was an arch enemy of our hero, Papa Obafemi Awolowo. And how come that we were supporting Abiola? Our response was that we were not supporting Abiola as a person. We are supporting democracy. And we are fighting for the restoration of the mandate which we gave to Abiola. That was the point they missed. So the struggle, I have no doubt, is well worth it. Yes, sacrifices were made. Some of our colleagues were killed. Some were driven into exile. I was detained for almost 2 years in Alagbon detention center. And while I was there, emissaries were sent to me by persons in government to remind me that I used to be part of them. Why was I supporting NADECO? And that if I renounce my membership of NADECO, I will be released from detention. Because my reply was that the honor will die in me if I were to denounce NADECO, which I participated in founding. Indeed, at the first meeting we had at General Adebayo's residence in Ikeja, Lagos, I, late General Admiral Ndubose Kanu and Mr. Yopadokun were the three members who were asked to withdraw from the meeting to go and deliberate on the name by which we will call ourselves. And we came back and reported that we were suggesting National Democratic Coalition. So I participated in forming NADECO. Indeed, I was the one who reported the outcome of our deliberation to the Naija meeting. I was a signatory to the ultimatum which was given to General Sani Abacha to hand over Abiola's mandate, by General Babangida. We were 52 in number, and I believe that was a shock to the military because never before had any civilian group defied or confronted the military. And so they unleashed a spate of assassinations, arrests, detentions, etc., etc. But at the end of the day, democracy prevailed. And I believe because of the very stout fight put up by NADECO, no military element had dared to threaten our democracy since 1993. Secondly, Nigeria has now enjoyed 26 years of unbroken democratic rule in Nigeria. I believe this has been due mainly to the NADECO struggle because the military didn't expect the resistance and therefore have not dared to tamper with democracy since 1999. So all in all, I have no doubt at all that it has been well worth it to have struggled to restore democracy during the period 93 to 99.
Thank you so much, sir. Now, while we're still looking at the historical context of today, we see that there's been a lot of revision of history and a lot of denial of history as well. We have the former head of state, Ibrahim Babangida, saying that, well, he's not the one who cancelled that election. It was General Sani Abacha. You have the widow of Sani Abacha coming to say that her husband's legacy is the victim of ethnic attack and that he's not guilty of many of the things people have given him responsibility of posthumously. What are your thoughts on this revising and denial of what we know as historical fact?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, the decisions regarding the annulment of the June 12 election was made by the military. I was no longer in government, and so could not pretend to have any inner knowledge of what was going on. But certainly, the military annulled the result of that election. Whether it was Abacha who did it, or Babangida who authorized it, it didn't matter. It was done by the military. It doesn't help us to try to identify the smoking gun or the individual who gave the final word. What matters is that the collective will of the people was annulled. And we decided that we will not allow that. That's what that happens. And it's also important that since then, no military in Nigeria had tried to overthrow democracy. I think we can attribute the continuous practice of democracy since 1993. We can attribute it, at least partially, to the democratic struggle by NADECO and other people. That's a positive from that struggle. That's a positive from June 12, because June 12 was a struggle for democracy. And therefore, the effect of June 12 is eternal. It's not a temporary thing. It's something that has endured for 25, 26 years. And I hope and pray that it's something that will continue to endure in our country. Of course, it's a different matter whether we have succeeded in replicating the free and fair election we witnessed on June 12, 1993. In fact, on that day, it was a beautiful day, like today. There was no rain, there was no crisis anywhere, there was no report of manipulated ballot. Everything was perfect. As if God wanted to contrast that with the unacceptability of the annulment. There was no justification for the annulment. But I believe the struggle it engendered, that it triggered, has given to Nigeria an enduring democracy. What is yet to be accomplished is the purity and acceptability of election results. It is as if June 12 never happened. If you look at the elections we've been having since then, they've been marked by violence, they've been marked by vote buying, they've been marked by endless litigation in the courts, etc., etc. I think that is where we should focus our attention. Why is it that we have not been able to replicate the quality of election we had on June 12, 1993? Yes, it has ushered in unbroken democratic rule, but it has not been able to pass on to the succeeding generation the conduct of free and fair elections. That, in my view, is where the focus should now be.
Okay, I mean, goodness me, it's a pleasure meeting you today. I cannot shower encomiums on you enough. Chief Olufalaye, Kabiyesi Olufalaye, His Royal Majesty. I thank you for your service to this country. And you have no idea the millions of people, you continue to inspire. Thank you. Thank you for your conviction. A lot of people that have that convictions are not too many in our society. But you see, after fighting with NADECO,
Yes.
After fighting with NADECO, sir,
Yes.
you became the first casualty of the things you fought against in the 1999 elections, which there were a lot of reservations against. Because we need to revisit that topic. You became the casualty of what you fought against. Deepening democracy, you were the consolidation candidate, you and Shinkafi, you went into those elections, but you became the victim of what you fought against. What happened in those 1999 elections? In fact, I still remember the commercial, the jingle.
Well,
Olufalaye, make you vote for Ram. Olufalaye for president.
Thank you very much for your kind words. Well, still no regret for the part I played in the NADECO struggle, even though I lost 2 years of my life in detention. Yes, we fought for democracy. Yes, in 1999 February, I contested the presidential election with my former boss and now friend, General Oluyemi. It was clear to everybody that I won that election. As you remember, I went to court. I hired late GCON as my lawyer. And GCON was able to establish that if the results that were duplicated were to be discounted, I won by 1.5 million votes. And I was told much later in London by late Ambassador Dende Fernandez that he had seen the results of the election with the Americans. That's the way he put it to me. And that I won a landslide victory. I have no doubt in my mind, and most Nigerians have no doubt whatsoever, that it was I that they voted for. Clearly, the military were jittery about a thoroughbred civilian taking over from them. They would rather go for a hybrid civilian, quote-unquote, politician in the person of my former boss, General Obasanjo. What I was told was that they were afraid that if I became president, I might decide to probe the military. Now, that's ridiculous because I spent 5 years in the Babangida government, first as secretary for 4 years, and then as minister for 1 year. How could I be so stupid as to probe a government of which I was a part? That as such beggars description. But clearly it was an excuse to do what they wanted to do. They believed that the military, they were safer in the hands of a former military person. That's okay by me. I had done my duty, I've paid my dues, and I'm happy that we are still practicing democracy, although it's not perfect. The results are questionable, but it is democracy. You can speak your mind, you can sue the government, you can form parties and do what you like. That is the essence of democracy. So that I was not allowed to enjoy my victory in the 1999 election was unfortunate because I believe, with all humility, that I was better prepared to govern Nigeria as president after 1999 because I had spent my entire life in the public service. As a civil servant, I was a federal permanent secretary. As managing director of Nigeria Merchant Bank for 5 years. As secretary to the federal government for 4 years, minister of finance for 1 year. I had combined experience in the public and private sectors. I want to say again, quite humbly, without any blemish, and without any crisis. And so I thought I was, and what is more, I spent almost 2 years organizing focus group discussions on various aspects of the Nigerian economy. And I was able to distill into my blueprint the outcome of those focus group discussions on agriculture, on education, on industry, on the military, foreign policy. I was ready to govern, to hit the ground running. I was prepared, I prepared little handbooks for every minister, containing the kernel and essence and outline of what I wanted to do in every sector. So that I would not go to Abuja and start thinking of what to do, setting up meaningless committees to think for me. At least I was clear in my mind where I wanted to take Nigeria. In fact, my blueprint was titled New Directions for the Third Republic. Despite all that, as I said, I have no regret at all that I participated in the NADECO struggle. Today we're enjoying democracy, and I hope we can improve on what is going on so that our democracy can become more and more credible. Thank you.
Dr. Bati?
Okay, very quickly, Kabiyesi. You just talked about the 1999 elections. I recall that in that election, President Obasanjo won by about 7,000 votes. he had 18,779 point something votes. You had 11 point something. But you just gave your credentials and you said, oh, you thought you were better qualified. You had been this, you had been that. But we both know that in this country, election is not about qualification. If it is about qualification, I will probably be.
But it ought to be. It ought to be.
Well, but it's not about qualification. So we know that. A motor packed out can become Minister of Transportation tomorrow. That's Nigeria. People who have never worked in their lives can become ministers. But let's leave all of that. There's no meritocracy in the leadership recruitment process. But when you look back, how do you feel? Do you think that President Obasanjo, you may say we won while you were asleep in the remaining local governments or states that were announced. But when you look back, after Obasanjo, we had Yaradua, we had President Jonathan, we had President Buhari, we now have President Tinubu. Will you say, well, maybe you lost to, somebody who did better or who laid a foundation for whatever? How will you assess, the man that you said won while you were asleep and they changed results overnight?
Well, with respect, I will rather not go into an assessment of the succeeding regimes or a ranking of the various presidents who have ruled since 1999. Forgive me if I decline to do that, but all I want to say is that each of those presidents contributed something, but my take is that most of them did not have a cohesive program for moving the nation forward. Many of them were not even prepared to be president. Some were persuaded, almost dragged into contesting the presidency.
Sorry to interrupt you, sir.
And
if you could be specific.
Yes.
You mentioned
Yes.
names, because these are specific, administration.
No, well, look, at the moment, I'm a traditional ruler now. I'm no longer a politician. If I was still a politician, yes, I would name names and do the ranking that we expect me to do. But now I'm a traditional. I must preserve the prestige of that position. I only speak in general terms. What I'm saying is that if I talk about General Obasanjo, he had no interest in running for president. It was an open secret that delegations were sent to him at Ota to persuade him to run. But in my case, over a 2-year period, prepared programs for running the country. That's what I mean. And from my experience as minister, as secretary of the government, as permanent secretary, I know that if you don't have at least the outline of your program before becoming president, you have very little chance of succeeding. Because from day one, it will be crisis upon crisis, fire brigade action. You must at least have the outline of what you want to do in government. Many of them didn't have such programs. That is the problem. We used to have development plans spanning 5 years in Nigeria to guide government investment and activities. But we have abandoned that for years now. So it is ad hoc, day by day, year by year investment program, what they call the rolling plan. So all in all, we have had very disjointed administrations since 1999. My hope is that a day will dawn when a political group and individuals will be able to offer Nigeria the kind of president and the kind of programs that will enable Nigeria to move forward and substantially eliminate poverty, insecurity, and hunger from our country. What has been going on for 25 years, in my view, has been ad hoc, day by day, trial and error kind of administration. Very unfortunate. You said earlier that merit does not decide the election of president. That's very sad. It ought to. It ought to. And it may not be the only criterion, but it must, of necessity, be one of the important criteria that we decide who governs Nigeria.
Thank you very much, sir. Now, you went into detail about the 1999 election. And I'm curious about other elections. Yeah. Because if you look at that June 12th election, the voter turnout was 35%. Yes. This is under military regime. The highest voter turnout we've recorded in Nigeria since 1999 was in 2003, when we saw 69% people turn out to vote. Now, in 2023, in our last election, that has dropped to just almost 27% of people who are coming out to vote. There's disillusionment. My question to you is, you've categorically stated your position on the 1999 election. Has Nigeria, in your opinion, had any free and fair election since June 12?
Thank you very much. I have my doubts whether we have had any free and fair election since 1993. We remember the violence that marked the 2003 election. There were widely reported acts of violence, brigandage, arson, killings all over the country. And I remember when Yar'Adua became president, he publicly admitted that he did not think the result was what he thought to be. He was horrified by the level of rigging and violence. So I don't think we have had any election that was free and fair. Of course, we have approximated what we got. If there was an election, somebody must emerge, otherwise there'll be anarchy. So I believe because of the doctrine of necessity of having a government, we have continued to stagger on, accepting substandard election results, and even up to now. So we can only hope that we put our act together and get a proper, an acceptable democracy, and acceptable results of democratic election. We have not had any election that was not backed by long drawn-out electoral petitions. Not once. I'm not saying people should not go to court if they are not happy. I went to court in '93, but I stopped short of the Supreme Court for very good reasons, which I will not elaborate now. But it has become the habit in Nigeria that as you are preparing for an election, you're also preparing for a long drawn-out election petition. You are assembling your lawyers, are mobilizing funds for what will follow the election. That should not be the case.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much, Kabesi, for your insights. And we also want to look at what kind of, electoral reforms. You've been part of an election in this country as presidential candidate. Will you recommend? But secondly, I also have two added questions. Sir, there's a lot of respect for you, but there's also a lot of criticism for you, Kabesi. And you know where the criticism comes from? The SAP days. You were in that IBB government.
I thought we'd come to that.
Yes, you were in that IBB government, sir. The SAP debates back and forth.
Yes, I was.
The second-tier foreign exchange markets in '86, and the naira to the dollar never recovered. And you took the reins of the finance ministry in the tail end of that government, 90 to about 91. And a lot of people still blame the role Falae played in that SAP debacle. Can you tell me your chronicle of those SAP days, the role you played, your arguments for, and the resultant effects of those decisions, economic decisions taken, sir?
Thank you very much. I wish we were to have an hour or two to deal with that subject alone. However, I will cram into the time left my comments on what you just said. First of all, people forget that it was President Shagari who plunged Nigeria into economic crisis by issuing import licenses with values far in excess of our earning of foreign exchange. So by the time Buhari took over, Nigeria was owing trade arrears of close to $30 billion. So when Babangida came in, he inherited a huge foreign debt burden. He didn't do it, Buhari didn't do it. It was inherited from Shagari. That's very important. So the SAP thing was an attempt to solve a problem. People don't blame the person who created the problem. They blame the person who tried to solve it and the methods he tried to use. And that's very important. Now, what was SAP? Now, when a country gets itself into a debt crisis, a debt trap, the international community has set up the Bretton Woods institutions, the IMF, the World Bank, and IDA, to come to the rescue of such a country. And so they came and said, all right, Nigeria will help you to get out of this mess. But the price to be paid was both economic and political. The economic price is that you'll be paying high rents, high interest rates, you'll be servicing debt at a very high level. The political price is that you lose part of your sovereignty. Because if you took the IMF package, the IMF will have the right to station in your central bank, and your Minister of Finance is officers from Washington to oversee your economic and financial policies. That was what would have been the ultimate humiliation for a country the size of Nigeria. And so SAP was contrived domestically by Nigerians for the Babangida administration. By the way, I was appointed secretary to the federal government on the 29th of January 1986. 6 weeks before that, Babangida announced on general radio and television that his government had adopted a domestic structural adjustment program to address the debt crisis. The point I'm making is that that policy was already government policy by the time I was appointed. I did not bring the policy, I did not recommend it, I did not make it. It was prepared by the Presidential Advisory Council, headed by my former teacher, President Aboyade, at the request of the federal government. That was already in place before I was even appointed. So, contrary to the general view that I brought SAP to government, that is totally false, absolutely false. However, as a professional economist and banker, I knew that once you are in debt, you cannot do what you like with your bank manager. If your account is heavily overdrawn and your salary goes into your bank account, you can only draw funds from your account at the discretion of the bank manager. This is what happened to Nigeria. We were in debt. We had no choice but to pay the debt back. And we could not impose our solution on the international community. So they had us by the throat. Somebody said, well, those institutions are set up to bring us back to colonial system. That is true. In fact, that's why they were set up, to make irresponsible and reckless countries lose part of their sovereignty. It's a very painful thing to do. But Babangida, the SAP you are talking about, did not take, we signed an agreement with the IMF, but we did not draw the IMF funds, which will have entailed the appointing people to run our economy. I want to make that clear. So all I did really was to explain what the whole thing was about, that we were pushed into it by the huge debt accumulated by Shagari, and that we had no choice. If we did not do a deal with our creditors, we will stop trading internationally. We will not be able to import anything more into Nigeria. The wheat for bread import, raw materials for factories in Nigeria will be in crisis. So it was not a pleasant thing. It was the least bad of all the bad options available. So I've always asked people, what was the easier way out of the debt crisis that would have been less painful? If we knew it, we would take that path. But there was none. In fact, I think I would credit the Babangida's government for not taking the IMF loan and subjecting Nigeria to the ultimate humiliation of our economy being run by IMF staff from Washington. So all I did was to explain how we got there, what we are trying to do, and to also point out that there were negatives and positives. And one of the positives was the reform of the marketing board system, which enabled farmers to sell their produce to whoever they liked, and this saw the price of produce rise from about 4 or 5-fold within 2-3 years, which was very good for the farmers. So, and also the positive of the domiciliary account, which we introduced to encourage Nigerians to export and earn foreign exchange in their own accounts. Today, I believe the balances in those domiciliary accounts in Nigeria will be in the neighborhood of $35 billion. That's a positive. That has endured, that is helping the economy. So, all in all, I want to say, in summary, first, SAP was already government policy before I was appointed. 2, SAP was forced on the country by the fact that we were already indebted and our creditors insisted that we must pay them, and they would not accept any deal if it was not supervised by the IMF and the World Bank. We had no choice. 3, that in fact government avoided taking the IMF loan to avoid the humiliation of having foreigners run our economy. And 4, that there were not only negatives, there were also positive. That's what Nigerians didn't want to hear. If I talked about marketing board reform, the domiciliary account, they didn't want to hear it. But that's the truth of the matter. In any situation, there are positives and negatives. So all in all, I want to say that when I went into politics, I myself will ask my audience, I say, ask me questions about SAP. They call me Mr. SAP. Ask me questions.
Okay,
I don't dodge it. I don't dodge it. Ask me questions. Asking me now. So, I'm happy to answer the question.
A lot of people say that government was not upfront with people. What they promised was different from what was implemented. Was not upfront. Didn't come out clean with people. There was a lot of devaluation. That was where the first major devaluation of the currency started. The assurances they gave was that once SFEM kicked in, that his firm, it was going to be about 3 naira to the dollar, but as at 1991, 1992, it has gone up to 11 naira. So the devaluation never solved the problem. It brought a lot of inflation, it brought a lot of penury, and when you look at the campaigns of 93, it was that high inflation climate that MK Abiola campaigned on with his talk about his farewell to poverty. So a lot of people say, yes, it was a hard bullet you took, but that was the beginning. That was the beginning of the destruction of the lives of people. Yes, you can come in, Kabiyesi, sir.
Let me come in. I said something, please remember. I did say that having accumulated about $30 billion of trade arrears, we had no choice but to pay back the debt. If we didn't, we would be shut out from international trade, and Nigeria cannot survive without that. It was a terrible situation to be in. There's no panacea in some economic problems. You can only do the best that is possible in the circumstances. I don't remember that when I was in government, I left government in August 1990. We are talking of 1993, I was no longer in government. By the way, the exchange rate, government did not devalue the naira as a result of policy. We allowed for the first time economic forces of supply and demand to substantially, not exclusively, determine the exchange rate. That's the judgment of the market, which is superior to the arbitrariness of the central bank fixing rates in the past. I would rather take my chance in the market than with a bureaucratic method of doing business. So, by the time I left government in 1990, you know what the exchange rate was? 5 naira 50 kobo to the naira, after 3 years of SAP. It was after that, that begin to have 22 naira to the dollar, 48 naira to the dollar, 100 naira. For the time that I was there and we were implementing the structural adjustment program, the exchange rate never exceeded 5 naira 50 kobo. Not 50, not 500, 5 naira 50 kobo to the naira. If it was so today, Nigeria would be jubilating. So the point I'm making once more is that there were no choices. We did not decide to devalue so Nigerians can suffer. Because we're in a crisis, the economic forces determine the exchange rate of the naira.
Okay, Kabiyesi.
Is there any other way of doing it?
Okay,
By arbitrarily fixing the rate? No.
Okay, Kabiyesi.
That was the best that was possible in the difficult situation in which we find ourselves. That's the truth.
Okay, Kabiyesi. You said there was no other way.
Solution. What was it? How do we do it?
Okay, Kabiyesi, you said...
The better way. The other way can be worse, but a better way. Okay. An easier way. A more, an easier way. If there is a... We would have taken it. We're Nigerians. Nobody wants to suffer.
Okay.
But I can't answer for the economy after I left office. After 1990, I can't answer for it.
Okay. Let's play it this way. Now, you're saying there was no alternative at that time that the structural adjustment program was introduced.
No better alternative. Please, no better alternative.
Okay.
I'm not saying there was no alternative. There was no better alternative.
Okay. What will you
if
then
you know
say?
It, what is it?
Okay. What will you then say about the proposal by the Economic Commission for Africa, led by Professor Adebayo Adedeji, which proposed under the rubric of the Lagos Plan of Action an alternative? So what's your response to that? Are you saying that the Economic Commission for Africa, led by Professor Adedeji, had a wrong-headed approach to economic renewal? Now, secondly, if you look back...
What did they offer?
Well, I mean, you are the economist. What they offer was different.
No, you are the one using. You are using them.
No.
You are using them to counter my position. What did they say?
No, what they offer was different from structural adjustment program of the Bretton Woods institutions as they were then known, and also the debate, the sub-debates in Nigeria, roundly rejected that proposal by the government of President Babangida. But the question I really want to ask is, when you look back and you look at the present, how do you compare and contrast the SAP proposals and what we now have under President Tinubu about, free market economics, removal of fuel subsidy, foreign exchange market, liberalization, harmonization, and all of that.
Thank you
how do you compare the two? As an economist.
Thank you very much. You see, our problem has been abuse. And, we can never surrender the economy to blind market forces. At the same time, you cannot oust market forces from the determination of economic parameters. You have to have a balance between government intervention and the working of market forces. So that is the path of wisdom. We cannot continue to administratively determine the exchange rate by the central bank and think that the economy could grow and develop. Because by the time the crisis came, the naira was already heavily overpriced. And if you did not move towards the market, your economy will suffer as a consequence. But you do not abandon, as I said, the economy entirely. That's my position. If you leave everything to market forces without checks by government policy, you get very unacceptable results. Now, you talked about exchange rate and oil subsidy. These are Nigerians were used to having an exchange rate that enables us to go on holidays, to buy Rolls Royce cars. There's nothing wrong. They are good things, but they are not sustainable. What is the development stage of our economy that you'll be able to be doing the things we are doing. So it was a reality check that your exchange rate was adjusted. When I was in government, it never went beyond 5 naira 50 kobo. I repeat again. But subsequently, I believe abuses came in, and the thing it went haywire. When I was there, there was to allow market forces as well as government intervention to manage the economy. And it was, in my view, an acceptable system. But as I said, I can't answer for the period when I was not in government. Now, talking about oil subsidy, I want to talk about that. My view has always been that government has no business, and to have no business, fixing the price of petrol. Why? Petrol is not as essential as food. We all must eat every day. I don't have to use petrol at all if I don't move out of my house for a week or a month. But government does not fix the price of food. Why? So my point is, government should have put the right policies in place and allow demand and supply to determine the price of a fuel, like the price of food and clothes and shoes. What's peculiar about petrol that's not peculiar about food? So I've always denied, I've always insisted that what we needed to do in petroleum was to, I'm happy the government is doing it now, use sell naira, sell petrol in naira. The other way to do it is say that the crude producer should sell crude oil to domestic refiners at the cost at which they are producing the crude product, their profit, and to be refined at that price and sold to Nigeria. If that were to happen, we'll have a much lower petroleum pump price today. But what has been happening is that petrol has been priced at the international price level. That's the snag, really. The cost of producing a barrel of crude in Nigeria is far less than the price at which it is sold internationally. And they were using that international price to price petroleum here. So until we come back to making the producers sell crude to refiners at their cost of production plus their profit in naira, we will not have the right price for petrol. So that's my position. It has been so for a very long time. And the exchange rate, again, I believe the merger of the 6 exchange rates in Nigeria needed to happen, was the right thing to do, because no serious country we have an exchange rate for manufacturers, a different one for those who want to go on holidays, a different one for those who want to pay fees. It has to be one single exchange rate. But people have enjoyed these multiple exchange rates to their advantage. So before stopping it or merging them, if I were president, I would have done one or two things to be prepared for the surge in demand that was sure to come. And the way to do it is to mobilize additional resources, foreign exchange resources, that will be robust enough to withstand the initial surge. Because people will panic. Those who have been benefiting from the multiple rates will panic and rush to buy dollars, even when they don't really need it. So you anticipate that, you build up your reserves, and when they rush, they get dollars, and when they keep getting it at the new rate for about a month or two, the panic will subside. It's been done in other countries in Latin America. We have examples to follow. So if we had done that, we'll have merged the 6 rate, and the naira would not have fallen to where it is today. That is what I would have done if I was president.
Thank you, and thank you for that submission, and thank you for those very clear, well thought out ideas. I'd like to focus on the present, an assessment of democracy 26 years later. Several people are making sweeping statements and comments about the health, if I may call it, of Nigeria's democracy. You have one state that is not under democratic rule currently, that's Rivers State. You have the diplomats have come out to speak out, and some civil society organizations have also spoken out about the freedom of speech through the Cybercrime Act, what they're calling the weaponization of the Cybercrime Act. You have a situation where it almost seems as though the competitive nature of multi-party democracy and multi-party politics is beginning to wane. So if you were to assess Nigeria's democracy today, what is the score that you would give it? Is it healthy? Is it in need of help? Does it need to be rushed to the ICU? What's your take?
Well, my take is that there is a lot to be improved before we get an acceptable democracy. Unfortunately, sadly, money has become perhaps the sole determinant of who wins an election. Very unfortunate. Money is always necessary for any enterprise, but it should not become the only factor that will determine the outcome of an election. We no longer hear about any manifestos. I believe as some public officers today about their party manifesto, they probably ask you, what is a manifesto? Perhaps that ought to be the foundation of democracy. The party to state its objectives, the things to do for the people. And that is the basis on which they will compete for the vote of the people. It's no longer so. So it's just money. And so once money becomes the only thing, then all other things will come in, because everything has a price. So freedom of speech, I believe that every freedom should observe certain ground rules. Otherwise, it will produce unacceptable results. Somebody said, your freedom ends where my nose begins. If there are no such ground rule, then I'll be free to come into your bedroom and say, this is Nigeria, I want to live there. Oh, by the way, one of the housemen who kidnapped me years ago said that they had the right to come to this area because it's part of Nigeria. And I told him that, yes, it's part of Nigeria, but God has created different people to live in different places. That is Nigeria does not mean it's your property. So there must be ground rules to regulate democracy and freedom. Otherwise, freedom can become oppressive.
Okay.
Freedom of speech, the sort of thing you find on the social media, some of them are so atrocious. I don't read them. Complete fabrications, slanders, and stories that can cause riots and violence should not be allowed on the social media or in the print media. That does not mean you gag the press, no. But to protect the freedom of other people while allowing people free speech.
Okay. So, sir, you asked the question, and thank you so much, Kabiyesi, for this robust engagement. Tubak performance, sir.
Yes.
And probably one of these days I'd just like to come learn at your feet. You asked the question, that what other methods should we have used? For the sake of history and interaction, could we have gone the way of what Obafemi Awolowo did when we had this same debacle after the war, or during the war, balancing the war economy, getting money to fight the war, also leaving the sterling union, but still balancing the economic outlook, that the austerity was not too much on the people, to a certain extent that even when growth came in the 70s because of the Yom Kippur War and crude oil growth, we benefited from. Is there anything we could have learned from how Awolowo managed the economy? Secondly, you were kidnapped.
Yes, thank you very much.
So sorry about that.
Papa Awolowo.
I want to add one more to it, sir.
Papa Awolowo is a very, very...
I want to add one more to it, sir. I want to speak about the fact you were kidnapped. Sorry about that, Kabiyesi, but can you say security has improved around your area, and we will never have a repetition of such kidnapping again with you as we wrap up, sir?
Okay, thank you.
Sir.
Thank you very much. Papa Awolowo was a very disciplined person. I had the privilege of watching him perform in the National Executive Council between the years, I would say, 67, 68, 69. when I used to accompany my minister, commissioner, to those meetings. Papa Awolowo did not allow any trade areas to accumulate. Because once that happens, your options are foreclosed. You become a victim in the hands of your creditors. He never allowed it to happen. He always operated within the resources of Nigeria, which he managed with sagacity and with discipline. So that was why I was able to manage the war economy without undue suffering by the people. Now, talking about kidnapping, I was one of the earliest victims of kidnapping. And today, at least in my part of Nigeria, which is Ondo State, Akure, the introduction of Amotekun by the state government has substantially reduced the threat of terrorists and kidnappers in this state. It used to be the case that whenever I went to my farm, I still go to the farm occasionally, I would find herds and herds of cattle, free ranging in the farm. So the government has passed the Amotekun law, and the Amotekun people now patrol the forests of the state. And since then, there has been a reduction in the incidence of kidnapping. Only yesterday, we were assured by the state governor that the government is setting up outposts in the areas most easily susceptible to kidnapping attacks. So all in all, I would say the security in Ondo State has improved substantially in the last 2 years, following the introduction of Amotekun and the anti-open grazing law. Those two enactments have made security much better, but can be improved still. As a traditional ruler in my domain, I have organized hunters, and I use them to survey the environment and to work with the police and the Amotekun to carry out patrols in our forests. So all in all, security has improved.
Well, Kabiyesi, as you begin to wrap up, two quick things. You have been through the parliamentary system of government, you have been through the presidential system of government. What system of government will you recommend? Parliamentary or presidential? Because that's part of the debate. And second, on this occasion of Democracy Day,
yes,
what would be your advice to President Tinubu? What would be your advice to President Tinubu? Two things.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Your first question is the easiest question anyone can throw at me. The parliamentary system is by far more suitable to a multi-ethnic country like Nigeria, more affordable to the Nigerian economy. We were at the national conference where I had the privilege to have been elected leader of the Yoruba delegations. We made a very strong case for the parliamentary system. First of all, the parliamentary system decentralizes power and authority through a collective cabinet. A cabinet which features ministers who must first of all be elected as members of the legislature before they could become ministers. In the presidential system, the president could appoint anybody, whether it's literate, whether it's armed robber, appoint him as minister and sack him as he wishes. But in the parliamentary system, you must have been elected by your people, you must have been accepted as a political leader in your constituency before you can be a member of the House and before you can be a minister. That's the first one. Number two is that unless you are a multi-billionaire today, you cannot try to be the president or even a governor. In the parliamentary system, all you needed to do was to win an election as a member of the House of Representatives or the legislature, and if your party happens to have the majority in that house, then that majority will elect or appoint you as the prime minister and head of government. So ordinary people with ordinary means could still attain high office in the parliamentary system, not so in the presidential. And thirdly, I can't go on and on. Thirdly, the parliamentary system is a consensus-building system where the Prime Minister is a member of the legislature and was therefore open to advice and criticism by the legislators, and where the Prime Minister has to carry along his colleagues in the House. If he didn't, then they could pass a vote of no confidence in him and remove him. So, but in the presidential system, the president only goes to the legislature to announce the budget. The House has no really, cannot pass a simple vote of no confidence and remove him. And with his awesome powers, there was no way a budding dictator could be disciplined by the president in the presidential system. So all in all, and in a multi-ethnic group like Nigeria, the decentralization of power and authority and resources is an absolute necessity. But the presidential system is a centripetal force, bringing everything to one point. And clearly, the presidential system is far inferior and less desirable in this type of country.
Well,
now, what do I have to tell President Tinubu? First of all, I say with humility that I have access to the president to be able to offer him considered advice if I want to. Advice offered in public and on the pages of newspapers or in the media is often taken with suspicion. So I will not therefore buy into that question and begin to rattle about what advice I will give President Tinubu. I've had the opportunity and the privilege to have talked to him since he became president. However, all I want to say to you and to Nigerians in general is that governance is a very, very difficult thing. When I was Secretary to the Government and Minister of Finance, I saw a bit of the reality of governance. It is the most difficult thing. I used to say that it is easier to run General Motors or Coca-Cola company than to run a local government, because the mandate of the managing director of Coca-Cola or General Motors is huge but simple. Produce cars that the public will buy, or produce Coke that the public will buy. There are no ambiguities. But even in a local government, what is in favor of farmers is contrary to the interests of consumers in town. Take food. In the present situation, I live in Iluabo now, which is a fairly rural place. I can tell you that the local people are building houses now. I'm happy about that. They are not taking loans to do so. Where is the money coming from? It's coming from the improved prices of foodstuffs. Gari and fufu and plantain and yams. They are getting good money from the product, and they are building houses. They are buying Okada. Good. But the people living in Akure town are not happy because what is income to the farmers is cost, high cost to the city dwellers. So a government must marry these two conflicting interests. So that's what makes governance a tricky and difficult matter. That's what makes it much easier to run Coca-Cola and to run General Motors. So I remind President Tinubu about this complexity at the very core of governance, and to try his best to balance all the interests of social groups, of various ethnic groups, religious groups. Very difficult, but doable. With prayers, I believe he can succeed.
Well, on that note, we would like to thank you very much, Kabiyesi, for joining us on the morning show. Thank you very much indeed.